The year is 2024, and Zelda has finally taken center stage in her very own video game, even though her name has consistently been in the title of the most famous video game series in history since the very beginning. So today, it is time for a long overdue look at the history of the character. And today, we are going to count down the top 10 best Zelda characters ever. So Zelda has taken on a lot of forms over the years. She's a princess, she's a pirate, she's a ninja, she's the protagonist of her own game. But today, we are going to count down the top 10 best. These are the top 10 Zeldas. It's kind of unfortunate that although the original Legend of Zelda is an iconic video game and one of the best ever made, Zelda does not appear until the very end, and she doesn't really leave much of an impression, right? There's some tidbits in the manual that, like, she sent Impa out to find some hero, and she found Link, and that was the beginning of the legend, so to speak. But you don't see her until the end, and it is a nice pleasant surprise to see her, much like Peach in the original Super Mario Bros. But even back then, it felt kind of been there, done that, right? It felt as if the character didn't really establish herself, right? In a weird way, Zelda 2 is actually way better at doing this because in this game, Zelda's under a spell. This game showcases from the very beginning and every time you get a game over that Link is desperately worried about Zelda and is going on the adventure to try and restore her to life, right? There's some like lore thing about how this is the same Link as the first game, but a different Zelda, right? I don't know how canon all this is, but that's the explanation I've been told. But the fact that you constantly return to the palace where she lies asleep is a really good reminder of just what you're doing adventuring throughout the world, right? This is why you're playing Zelda 2, to give this girl a second shot at life. And when you get to that ending, when you get to Dark Link and the curtain falls, you are pretty promptly rewarded, right? This is a really good example of just how NES games manage to grow and develop and evolve the characters, even with the first installment. This game makes you care more about the character of Zelda than the first one did. And for that, it is a very, very important entry in the series. It's kind of weird to say this considering how unpopular the character is and how she's overshadowed by Midna in her own game. But the thing that really made me love Twilight Princess the instant I saw it was that image of Zelda in that robe, in that tower, awaiting to be rescued, right? I remember seeing those trailers and just seeing those monsters like circling the spire, and she's just standing there and you can't make out her face or her design or anything about it. It was an amazing reveal trailer and was my first exposure to the game. I didn't grow up on like the blades will break trailer. No, I grew up on this one, right? The E3 2004 trailer, 2005 trailer. Like, this is the one that I grew up watching, right? This is the version of the character that I was introduced to, right? This was the first Zelda game I was able to follow along with in development and see come out, like anticipate release, right? Like, this was a monumental moment in my life, right? And you can argue that like the character doesn't live up to the hype, that like she doesn't have a lot of focus, she appears only 3 times, but I would argue the character has a lot of really memorable, interesting scenes, right? Meeting her the first time, the time she restores Midna, and the final fight at the end, where you in the first phase have to go up against her, right? A possessed version of her. It's not a whole lot, but it is a really good example of how the character of Zelda doesn't need to be in focus in the plot to leave a really strong general impact. This is not the best version of the character, but I don't think they were going for that. They really wanted to go for this like completely different vibe for this game, and I think they really hit it out of the park in a lot of subtler, more engaging ways. People forget sometimes that the Oracle games were originally intended to be kind of a callback to the original NES Zelda. I believe Seasons in particular was originally envisioned as a straight up remake, but not a whole lot of that remains in the final game. But there are like trace elements of it, right? From the design of the first dungeon to some certain plot aspects, Impa coming to find Link and setting him on the journey. And when you link a game and start your playthrough on your second game, right? Zelda appears into the picture. That's right. Zelda does not appear in the first Oracle game you play, but in a linked game for the second. And in that one, it's made abundantly clear that she's taking all these actions to try and circumvent Ganon's resurrection at the hands of Twin Rova, right? Kom and Kotek, his adopted mothers, right? Zelda is taking action, utilizing every resource at her disposal, meeting Link, contacting him, like trying to contact the oracles, trying to use their power, trying to like get to the bottom of things, and it is all for naught because in spite of everything she tried to do in the first and halfway through the second, she is kidnapped, and you do have to go rescue her. You have to beat Twin Rova, and then you have to go beat Ganon, like you always do. But you really have to admire her grit. You really have to admire her pluckiness. You really have to admire just how much of a fight she managed to put up in this game. Even though like she wasn't able to directly contact Link until the second quest, right? Zelda in this game really showcases that she is a very capable, competent leader, someone who is willing to take initiative to to prevent a disaster. And I really, really enjoy her for that, especially since, because of the nature of the Oracle games, you get to see her do so twice over. Depending on which version of the game you play first, the circumstances of her kidnapping and how you meet her like change. So again, it leaves quite a bit of an impact on you when you play the games in an opposite order and get a completely different situation, but it all amounts to the same thing, right? It's really interesting to see, really exciting, and you get to see, different takes on the character. And I really, really appreciate the Oracle games for that. I am so heartbroken that I have to put this so low on the list because this really is a personal favorite of mine. If it wasn't for like just the sheer strength of all the other of the top fives, this would probably be number one because I am super, super attached to Spirit Tracks Zelda, right? This version of the character is so unapologetically girly and so willing to be rescued, so excited about it, so traditionally feminine that she's genuinely kind of upset that by circumstance she actually has to tag along with the hero on his journey. That's right. Zelda would much rather wait in the castle waiting to be rescued, but unfortunately, because her soul was ripped from her body, she has to tag along with Link, and she has to become friends with him, and she has to use whatever resources they can muster to stop Malladus from rising again. To restore the spirit tracks and to stop Chancellor Cole, right? Zelda is forced in this position where she has to take action, even though this version of the character is far from the hero that you see in other versions of the character, right? Like Zelda's really interesting in this regard because she's clearly frightened of very simple things. Mice, for example. Like she really has no idea what she's doing. She has no experience, but that's the kind of thing that really makes her stick out and it makes her likable, right? Is that she's clearly terrified of everything she's doing, of having to like even taking control of like a phantom and marching it around kind of unnerves her, right? She clearly like isn't comfortable going on an adventure at all But she goes ahead and does it anyway because she has to. And eventually, like, she and Link become genuine friends and form like this really good relationship. And I think that's a really cool, like, interesting message that even though this person was not capable of being a hero or thought herself incapable, she still came out and did it anyway. And I really, really admire her for that reason. There's no denying that for a lot of fans, Wind Waker is a really essential title and one of the iconic GameCube games. I'm not too overly fond of it, but one of the things that really, really cemented as an all-time classic is how it treated the Kingdom of Hyrule, and specifically what happened to Zelda's line. Right, the royal family. Hyrule's no more. It's buried under the sea, but its line lives on in Tetra and through like her pirate crew. She is Princess Zelda, a fact that is revealed sometime through the game, and is kind of a shocking twist, I think. I've heard anecdotes of people like figuring out that like Zelda was Sheik because of circumstantial evidence, but when it comes to the Tetra being Zelda thing, this really is, I think, for a lot of GameCube fans, this really unexpected twist that really radically alters the themes and the ideas of the story, right? What was once this really interesting new setting, like on this open ocean that didn't really seem to have any ties to past Zelda games, we suddenly have this very strong link to the past, right? That Zelda is still very much a prominent character in this game, after not appearing at all in Majora's Mask. Zelda is still a very much prominent character in this game, and the game's and really emphasizes the strengths of Wind Waker's unique themes, right? Nintendo had put out the best game ever made with The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and they knew they were going to have a hard time following up with it. And a lot of those feelings and ideas really made their way into Wind Waker, right? Where no matter what happens, you have to keep moving forward and you have to find your own land, right? It's not going to be Hyrule, it will be your land. So although Zelda is Tetra, right? Tetra is Zelda, she is still very much her own person, right? She has her own goals, her ideas, her relationships, her own unique personality. Like compared to most Zeldas, she really sticks out as being somewhat of a tomboy and somewhat brash and aggressive, and not at all like the traditional depictions of the character. But that's what makes her so special and unique. Like Tetra, I think, is the first time we really saw a Zelda have such a wildly different personality. Right, Zelda was a kind of a tomboy in Ocarina of Time, according to the Gossip Stones anyway. But Wind Waker was the game that really emphasized this as a core character aspect of her. And that's what made a lot of people really fall for her and really, really love the iconic ending to the game in which both Link and Zelda team up to defeat Ganon. And not like that pansy way that they did in Ocarina of Time. Like, no, like Zelda's out there, on that in the arena, like firing light arrows, and like without her, you would not have been able to win at all. It's it's a really the character is an icon, and honestly is one that I really wish we saw more of. The Phantom Hourglass version was a complete departure from everything that made Wind Waker great, but Wind Waker itself is an absolute masterclass of storytelling and really should be considered as one of the all-time greats in the series. And a big reason for that is because of the Zelda character. The absolute icon, the A Link to the Past version of the character, is an essential part of what makes the opening scenes of A Link to the Past so iconic for generations of gamers. Right, approaching the castle on a stormy night, raiding it, like breaking into the dungeon, stealing her away, taking her to Sanctuary, actually a church. The opening segments of that game make you feel like you're a legendary hero right off the bat. Kids get so excited when they save Zelda and they put her away and they're sure that she'll be safe. While you go out and you collect the spiritual stones and get the Master Sword so you can beat Agahnim. And then they find her. She gets kidnapped by soldiers. The kindly priest who helped protect her is dead. His last words to you to go save her And you have to go climb up the tower, get to where she is, and watch her be spirited away. It is like a downright like heart-wrenching sequence because you really think the girl is going to be fine, but you end up just with this absolutely just tragic situation in which she just gets ripped right from under you, right? And you don't see her again until you clear all the dungeons in Dark World. In the Dark World, you beat Turtle Rock, and she comes out and tells you, "Go beat Ganon," right? Again, this this situation really is the first Zelda game to establish the stakes, right? This is the Zelda game in which Zelda establishes her psychic connections, her psychic abilities to communicate with Link telepathically, to tell him to come save her, right? And he does everything in his power to help her, and he just can't do it, right? In spite of your best efforts, every single time she does get abducted. But in the end, it all works out. It's all fantastic. And again, I wish the character was a lot more fleshed out. Like again, it does kind of feel like she doesn't have much of a personality, and she's just kind of there. But to me, like her portrayal in this game is the first time ever that players were able to interact with the character in a meaningful enough way to have a real attachment to her and to be upset when something happens to her in the plot, right? To me, this is like the essential core aspect of Zelda. And this is the game that established that formula. Yep, you all knew it would be on here at somewhere. You all knew that Zelda's game would be on the list somewhere. It was just a matter of like placing it. And although I really, really enjoy Echoes of Wisdom, and it really does a great job at emphasizing Zelda as a character and really proving her to be a capable, competent protagonist, there are games that do a way better job of emphasizing the iconic themes and ideas of the Zelda series and Zelda as a character. And Echoes of Wisdom is meant to be a kind of a subversion of that, which is part of what makes it great. But at its core, how can you not love this as a concept? Zelda actually being playable in a Zelda game. It's such a charming idea. And they really, really, really made it work. Right? Zelda's likable. She's kind. All the people in Castletown know her by name. Right? They get excited whenever she talks to them. Right? She spends her time traveling the land and helping other people in need. Right? Everybody loves her because she's such a nice person. And she is more than capable of fixing the situation that Link got himself into, right? Like she was able to correct the rifts, to save Link and go defeat the monster responsible, right? Like because of what she did throughout Echoes of Wisdom, like everything's all right now. We no longer have to deal with the rifts. Zelda is the reason why we don't have them anymore. so so yeah, Zelda is an absolute icon in this game. She's a banger. And she has all these really interesting powers and mechanics that really make the game shine, but it is the character herself that just really, really owns it. You really get the impression that this is like a normal, kind girl thrust into this extraordinary situation, right? She has friends, she has loved ones, right? Her father like sacrifices himself to protect her at one point, right? Someone she doesn't know, Link, comes to rescue her, and they form a friendship afterward, right? Like it really demonstrates just the strength and capability of the capabilities of the character, right? People saw this and immediately saw the potential in it, like, and Nintendo delivered on that in spades. Echoes of Wisdom is a wonderful game, this year's best, and I highly, highly suggest you check it out. The woman, the myth, the legend. Ocarina of Time Zelda. How can you not look at this character and just be blown away by her design, what she does in the plot, her iconic role, all of these critical aspects of the character that were introduced in this game, including Zelda's Lullaby. Impa appears in game for the first time. You have like unique personalities, a unique personality. And of course you have like the fact that everything that happens is her fault. A fact that she acknowledges at the end of the game after the adventure is through and done, right? It is remarkable that Ocarina of Time, the best game ever made, features a plot that could have been easily avoided, and yet nobody really notices or cares because the reasoning behind it flows so naturally and just feels so organic and wonderful, right? Like Zelda, much like Link does, grows and develops as a character as the game progresses. Thrust into an extraordinary situation, using every resource at her disposal to try and put a stop to Ganondorf's plans. She has to flee her castle and go into hiding for 7 years, waiting for the hero of time to return. And when he does, she immediately sets him on the path he needs to take in order to rescue the sages and get and have the power he needs to defeat Ganondorf and save Hyrule once and for all. The character is just an absolute gem. She does so much in this game, in spite of her like very limited appearances, and really establishes herself as one of the all-time great female video game leads. Like, if any doubts were had that the Zelda character was an icon, I think all of them fell by the wayside by the time this game came out. This game demonstrated just what made Zelda as a character so special, and really demonstrated that the IP would continue for decades to come. I hated Zelda in Breath of the Wild, right? She was annoying, she was obnoxious, her scientific gimmick was cute, but they didn't really do a whole lot with it. She doesn't do anything in Breath of the Wild. They wanted to do something like it with the original Zelda where you don't really see her until the end, but then like the flashback sequences don't make her likable. She's annoying, she comes off as like condescending. Like she was honestly my least favorite character ever, right? Like I hated her in Breath of the Wild. Imagine my shock to see how far she's come in Tears of the Kingdom. Seeing her like venture below Hyrule Castle with Link, trying to look into what's happening, being abducted, seeing how much like the people of Hyrule love and care about her, seeing like meeting NPCs who know her, learning that she's like she regularly attends a school and like regularly tutors kids. The fact that she took over your house, the fact that like she's vanished and nobody knows where she is, the slow gradual realization of like where she's been and what she's been doing. All of it really completely 100% like turned my opinion on the character around. In Tears of the Kingdom, she is one of the best incarnations of the character ever, right? At the time, like, you don't even realize it. But when you go through the game, experience all the quest lines, meet all these NPCs, when you see her story unfold, when you pull the Master Sword, when you beat Ganon, and when you do that final dive, which, by the way, is the single best ending in any Zelda game ever. Like, don't deny it. It is true. Like, when you do that dive and you catch her out of the air, it's like an absolute peak Kino, like the most romantic moment ever. It's crazy. It is like a top tier thing that I really wish got talked about more. But again, as it stands, like this is one of the best incarnations of the character ever. The second best by my estimation. It's so weird to think how things were back in the days of yore, back in the ancient year of the dinosaurs, in 2011, where people genuinely thought that Nintendo was going to go bankrupt, that the Wii was a passing fad, that the Zelda IP couldn't compete with open world RPGs like Skyrim, things like Dark Souls weren't relevant yet, right? Back then, there was this very real, adamant obsession among the gaming public to pretend that The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword was a bad video game. And of course, like all pretendo narratives, it's fallen apart with time, right? People have discovered the game, like they know how good it is. It really is a top tier Zelda game, probably the best out of like the Ocarina style follow-ups, like 3D Zelda games. It's phenomenal in a lot of ways. You know, the dungeon design, the combat, the adventure, the overworld design. Like, it paved the way for Breath of the Wild for sure, right? But one of the things that even the most hardcore of Nintendo haters could not downplay was just how amazing Zelda was as a character in this, right? Everybody brought this up. Any longtime fan who's been following these characters for decades found themselves completely enamored with this version of Zelda, right? Where she is not a princess, she is Link's childhood friend who goes missing under extreme circumstances, and he has to go on an adventure to find her. He doesn't know why, he doesn't know where he's going, he doesn't know what's happened to her, but he's gonna do it anyway. In a lot of ways, Skyward Sword really deviates a lot from the traditional Zelda formula, right? Like it's an origin story for a lot of critical aspects of the lore, right? You know, this is where like Ganondorf's hatred came from. This is we learn about the founding of the land of Hyrule and Zelda before like the Hyrule family was established, and uh, we learn the origins of the Master Sword. But one of the interesting things about it is that we really learn what Zelda is like as a person. You know, we really see how self-sacrificing she is. We see how much she cares about Link. We see just how it breaks her to do what she has to do, but she goes ahead and does it anyway. And when you finally complete the game, you just have this feeling of just pure elation and joy. Skyward Sword is an absolute gem of a video game and really needs to be acknowledged more as an absolute banger in the Zelda lineup. But I do think it does get credit for one very specific thing: its portrayal of its legendary heroine.